A destitute, homeless girl dared to steal food from a fancy restaurant, and a billionaire declared, "I will pay." Rainwater trickled relentlessly from the tattered zinc roof of the derelict kiosk that had been Mary's shelter the previous night. Her stomach churned with a gnawing hunger, a pain more profound than anything she could bear. Just 6 months prior, her life was filled with the warmth of a loving home, the echoes of laughter, and the unwavering embrace of her parents. But fate had dealt a cruel hand, snatching them both away in a single, devastating week. Her uncle and his wife, driven by avarice rather than affection for her father's property, reluctantly took her in. However, their pretense of care was short-lived. Within weeks, they cast her out onto the unforgiving streets, treating her as if she were mere garbage. Since that fateful day, the hard pavement had become her bed, the overflowing dustbins her meager kitchen, and the sting of rejection her constant companion. That morning, however, felt different, even more desolate than usual. The bins behind the market stalls were barren, offering nothing but discarded plastic bags and shattered bottles. The other children who typically shared their meager scraps with her were nowhere to be found, leaving her to confront the emptiness of hunger all alone. With heavy steps, she dragged her weary legs toward the bustling main road, her eyes scanning the faces in the crowd, desperately searching for a glimmer of hope. "Perhaps today, someone will show me a little kindness," she whispered to herself, her hand clutching her aching chest. The sun had ascended, bathing the vibrant African city in its golden heat. People hurried about, adorned in elegant clothes, their faces reflecting purpose and prosperity. Cars honked impatiently, adding to the cacophony of urban life. Life seemed abundant everywhere, except in Mary's desolate world. She passed by vendors selling roasted corn, the enticing aroma triggering a painful pang of hunger, but no one spared her a second glance. Finally, her gaze was drawn to a towering glass building in the distance. Regal Bites Restaurant, the most renowned and modern establishment in town, a place where affluent men indulged in lavish plates of jollof rice and chicken, costing more than she had ever seen in her entire life. She knew that impoverished children like her were not welcome within its opulent walls, but the desperation of hunger drowned out the voice of shame. Mustering her courage, she took a hesitant step inside. The delectable aroma of fried chicken and savory stew almost overwhelmed her senses, threatening to make her faint. The restaurant was bustling with activity. Tables were filled with impeccably dressed people, their laughter and conversations creating a lively atmosphere. Waiters in crisp, spotless uniforms moved with practiced efficiency. Mary approached the first table, her voice trembling slightly. "Please, sir," she pleaded. "Could you spare a small amount of food to help me?" The man didn't even bother to acknowledge her presence. He simply waved his hand dismissively, as if chasing away a bothersome fly. Undeterred, she approached the next table. "Madam, please," she begged. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." The woman's face hardened, her expression turning cold. "Go outside," she snapped. "This is not a place for beggars." One by one, rejection slapped her face, each encounter adding to the sting of humiliation. Some turned away in disgust, others hurled insults, and still others acted as if she were invisible, a mere shadow in their privileged world. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill over, but the gnawing hunger pushed her forward, compelling her to persevere. Then she noticed it, a table near the corner, where a plate of jollof rice with succulent chicken legs glistening in oil and emitting a tantalizing steam sat untouched. The owner had momentarily stepped away to answer a phone call. Her heart pounded in her chest. "No one wants to help me," she thought desperately. "Perhaps I must take matters into my own hands." Without allowing herself a second thought, she seized the plate and shoveled a spoonful of the savory rice into her mouth. The explosion of flavors was almost too much to bear, a reminder of the nourishment she had been deprived of for so long. It was the first real food she had tasted in weeks. She quickly devoured another spoonful, and then another, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and ravenous hunger. Suddenly, the vibrant atmosphere of the restaurant was replaced by an eerie silence. A man's booming voice shattered the stillness. "What do you think you're doing?" The man whose food she had taken stormed forward, his face contorted with fury. The waiters gasped in shock. Customers stared in disbelief, some shaking their heads in disapproval. Mary froze, the spoon suspended halfway to her mouth. She desperately wanted to run, to disappear from sight, but her legs refused to obey her commands. Her frail body trembled as the man's imposing shadow loomed over her. But then, another voice cut through the tension, calm, deep, and commanding. "Leave her alone. I will pay." Every head in the restaurant turned in unison. At the far end of the room, a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit sat composedly. His wristwatch sparkled under the soft light, and his very presence exuded an aura of power and authority. It was Daniel Johnson, the billionaire businessman whom everyone in town respected and admired. He rose slowly, his eyes fixed intently on Mary. "Bring her to me," he instructed. The angry man immediately stepped back, silenced by the billionaire's unwavering authority. The waiters hesitated for a moment, then gently guided Mary toward Daniel's table. Her hands shook uncontrollably, her heart racing with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Is this the moment my life ends?" she wondered, "or the moment it truly begins?" Daniel studied her closely, his gaze unwavering. Her dress was torn and dirty, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes sunken, yet filled with a spark of desperate courage. "Child," he said softly, his voice gentle, "why are you resorting to stealing food when you could have simply asked?" Mary's lips trembled, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "I asked, sir," she sobbed. "I begged everyone here, but nobody listened. They told me to leave. Sir, I haven't eaten in 2 days," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no other choice." The restaurant remained deathly silent, every patron captivated by the unfolding drama. Some customers averted their gaze in shame, while others whispered amongst themselves, their voices barely audible. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. Then, he offered a faint smile and gently pushed the plate of food toward her. "Eat, my child," he said kindly. "Eat as much as you want. From today onward, you will never have to beg for food again." A collective gasp filled the air. The same people who had cruelly rejected her only moments before now watched with wide, incredulous eyes. A few shook their heads in disbelief, while others clapped slowly, their faces etched with envy. But Mary could only stare at the plate in front of her, unable to fully comprehend the words she had just heard. Could it be true? Was her life about to undergo a dramatic transformation? She picked up the spoon with trembling hands and began to eat, savoring each bite as if it were a precious gift. But deep in her heart, she sensed that this was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that would irrevocably alter her world forever. The clinking of glasses, the boisterous laughter of the wealthy patrons, and the tantalizing aroma of roasted chicken seemed to fade into silence the moment Daniel spoke those life-altering words. "Eat, my child. Eat as much as you want. From today onward, you will never have to beg for food again." His voice resonated throughout the restaurant like a clap of thunder. Everyone's attention remained fixed on Mary, the skinny orphan with dust-covered feet and tear-stained eyes. The same girl they had mocked, insulted, and rejected just minutes earlier was now seated at the table of the wealthiest man in town. Mary's hand trembled as she lifted the spoon, her heart pounding in her chest. She desperately wanted to eat, to satiate the gnawing hunger that had plagued her for so long, but a heavy wave of shame pressed down on her. She could feel the burning stares of the other patrons surrounding her. Whispers began to circulate through the restaurant, their hushed tones laced with judgment and disapproval. "Why is he helping a street rat?" one woman muttered under her breath. "She's a thief. He should throw her out, not feed her." Another hissed. "Maybe she has bewitched him?" someone sneered, their voice dripping with sarcasm. But Daniel remained unfazed, seemingly impervious to the opinions of those around him. His eyes remained fixed on Mary, his gaze calm and reassuring, like a father watching over his beloved child. "Eat," he repeated, this time with greater firmness. Mary obeyed, her actions driven by a combination of hunger and a newfound sense of hope. The first bite sent a wave of warmth coursing through her body, almost bringing her to tears. It wasn't just the food itself, but what it represented. Hope, dignity, and a reminder that she was still worthy of human kindness. As she ate, Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with a contemplative expression. His mind drifted back to his own childhood, a time when he too had known the sting of poverty and the humiliation of being an outcast. People saw him as a billionaire now, a man of immense wealth and influence. But he hadn't always been this way. Once he had been a young boy with no shoes, selling oranges on the streets while others mocked and ridiculed him. That was why he understood the pain of hunger. That was why he couldn't simply turn a blind eye and let this child walk away unseen, her suffering unnoticed. He recognized a kindred spirit in her, a fellow survivor who had faced hardship with unwavering resilience. The waiter, visibly nervous but obedient, approached the table. "Sir," he said tentatively, "should I prepare another plate for her?" Daniel nodded in approval. "Bring the biggest meal you can serve," he instructed, "and a refreshing glass of juice." The waiter hurried away, eager to fulfill the billionaire's request. The restaurant buzzed with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and hushed speculation. Some customers shook their heads in disapproval, unable to comprehend Daniel's act of generosity. Others looked down in shame, their consciences pricked by the memory of their own indifference. The man whose food Mary had stolen stood rooted to his spot, speechless and bewildered. He couldn't fathom why this wealthy and influential man would show such compassion to a dirty, impoverished street child. When the second plate arrived, piled high with steaming fresh rice, grilled chicken, fried plantains, and a colorful salad, Daniel gently pushed it toward Mary. "This is all yours," he said with a warm smile. "Eat without fear." Mary looked up at him, her lips trembling with gratitude. "Sir," she whispered, "why are you being so kind to me? Nobody else even looked at me. They called me dirty, useless, a beggar." Daniel's voice was steady and filled with sincerity. "Because you remind me of myself when I was your age," he explained. "People only see your rags, but I see your strength. You fought to survive against all odds. That means you are not useless. You are a warrior." Tears streamed down Mary's cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you, sir." But not everyone at the table felt gratitude. At the far end of the room, a man in a sharp, impeccably tailored suit clenched his jaw in silent resentment. His name was Patrick, Daniel's personal assistant. He had served Daniel loyally for 5 years, meticulously handling his businesses, his travels, and his investments. Patrick believed he was the closest person to the billionaire, his most trusted confidant. But today, Daniel's unexpected act of kindness towards a dirty orphan made his heart boil with envy and resentment. How can he waste his time and money on this insignificant girl? Patrick thought bitterly. I have worked tirelessly for years to earn his trust and respect, and now this street thief just walks in and steals the attention I deserve. No, I will not allow it. Forcing a smile, Patrick approached Daniel as he beckoned him over. Patrick, Daniel said, arrange for this girl to be cleaned up and given new clothes. From today onward, she will eat at my table whenever she wishes. Patrick bowed respectfully, masking his true feelings beneath a veneer of obedience. Yes, sir, he replied smoothly. But inside, a fire of resentment burned fiercely. This child will not replace me, he vowed silently. She will regret ever stepping foot into this place. Meanwhile, Mary finished the food slowly, savoring every bite as if it were the last meal on earth. The fullness in her stomach brought tears of relief and contentment. For the first time in 6 months, she wasn't plagued by the gnawing pangs of hunger. When she was done, Daniel stood up, his movements commanding the attention of everyone in the restaurant. He took off his jacket and gently draped it over Mary's shoulders. It was far too big for her tiny frame, but it carried a warmth and comfort she hadn't felt since her parents had passed away. "This child is mine now," Daniel declared firmly, his voice echoing across the hall. "From today onward, she is under my protection. If anyone lays a hand on her, they lay a hand on me." Gasps of surprise and disbelief filled the air. Some clapped in admiration, applauding Daniel's act of compassion. Others whispered amongst themselves in disbelief, unable to comprehend his decision. Still others rolled their eyes in anger and resentment, their hearts hardened by prejudice and disdain. But nobody dared to openly challenge him. Daniel Johnson's word was law, and his authority was absolute. He guided Mary out of the restaurant, his hand firm on her back, providing her with a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. Cameras from onlookers clicked incessantly, capturing the scene for posterity. Murmurs of speculation and gossip followed them as they made their way onto the street. To the public, it was just another headline, a fleeting moment of drama in the life of a wealthy and influential man. Billionaire saves orphan girl in restaurant drama. But to Mary it was so much more. It was the first step toward reclaiming her stolen life, a beacon of hope in the darkness that had enveloped her for so long. Yet, as they stepped into the billionaire's sleek black SUV, one thing lingered in the shadows, casting a pall over the promise of a brighter future. Patrick's eyes, cold and calculating, watching their every move with a mixture of envy and malevolence. For Mary, this was undoubtedly the beginning of hope. But it was also the beginning of a new battle, one that would test her resilience and challenge her newfound sense of security. The black SUV glided smoothly through the wide streets of the city, its tinted windows shielding Mary from the stares and whispers of passers-by. She pressed her face against the cool glass, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the unfamiliar sights and sounds of her surroundings. It was the first time she had ever sat inside a car, let alone one that smelled of rich leather and exuded an aura of wealth and luxury. Daniel sat beside her, his presence radiating calmness and authority. He wasn't just a billionaire to her. He was a protector, a savior, a man who had seen her when no one else cared, who had recognized her worth when the world had deemed her worthless. "Don't be afraid," Daniel said at last, his deep voice steady and reassuring. "From today onward, your life will change in ways you can't even imagine. But you must remember, money and comfort don't erase pain. You will still face people who hate you for no reason, who judge you based on your past. Are you ready for that?" Mary turned to him, her small voice trembling but filled with determination. "Sir, I have been hated since my uncle threw me out onto the street," she replied. "I have slept on the hard pavement, eaten from the overflowing dustbins, and begged strangers who spat at me. Nothing they can do can hurt me more than I've already felt." Daniel studied her intently, his gaze filled with admiration. "This girl has fire," he thought to himself. "She has suffered immeasurably, but she has not been broken. Her spirit remains intact." The SUV turned into a long, winding driveway lined with swaying palm trees and meticulously manicured flower beds. At the end of the driveway stood a magnificent mansion, so tall and shining, it looked like something out of a fairy tale, a place that only existed in dreams. The golden gates opened automatically, revealing fountains that danced with sparkling water, polished luxury cars, and a team of gardeners meticulously trimming the flowers. Mary's mouth fell open in awe. This is your house?" she stammered, her voice barely audible. Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "It is a house," he replied. "But today it becomes your home." As they stepped out of the SUV, staff in neat, impeccably clean uniforms rushed forward, their movements displaying a practiced efficiency. Drivers, maids, and security guards all bowed their heads respectfully to Daniel, acknowledging his immense wealth and power. But when their eyes fell on Mary, whispers began to circulate amongst them, their hushed tones laced with curiosity and judgment. "Who is that girl?" one maid murmured. "She looks like she came straight from the street." "Why is Sir holding her hand?" another whispered, her voice filled with disapproval. Daniel ignored their whispers, his focus solely on Mary. He led her inside the mansion, his hand gently guiding her forward. The interior of the mansion was even more breathtaking than the exterior. Marble floors gleamed under the soft light, chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 stars, and walls were adorned with paintings and tapestries displayed in ornate gold frames. To Mary, it was overwhelming, a sensory overload of beauty and opulence. So much beauty that it almost hurt her eyes. But not all beauty welcomes. As they approached the grand staircase, a tall, imposing woman in a fitted gown appeared, her presence commanding attention. Her name was Angela, the mansion's head housekeeper. She had served Daniel for many years, running the household with an iron fist and ensuring that everything was in its proper place. Angela bowed respectfully to Daniel, her movements precise and elegant. But her eyes narrowed slightly as she glanced at Mary, her expression revealing a hint of disdain. "Sir?" she inquired, her voice laced with disapproval. "Who is this guest?" Daniel's tone was sharp and unwavering. "She is not a guest," he declared, his voice brooking no argument. "From today onward, she is under my protection. Treat her with the respect she deserves." Angela forced a smile, her eyes betraying her true feelings. In her mind, Mary was nothing but a dirty street child, an unwelcome intruder staining the mansion's pristine glory. Daniel called for Patrick, who had arrived in another car. "Patrick," he instructed. "I want her cleaned up, dressed in new clothes, and given a room. She will eat what I eat, and she will learn, study, and grow under my care." Patrick bowed respectfully, his smile masking the poison that festered within him. "Yes, sir," he replied smoothly. But inside, his mind screamed with resentment and anger. "So, the little thief will sleep in the mansion, wear fine clothes, and eat the food I have worked for years to afford," he thought bitterly. "No, I will not allow her to rise above me." Hours later, Mary stood before a mirror in a luxurious guest room, her reflection almost unrecognizable. The maids had bathed her, gently cleansing away the grime and dirt that had accumulated on her skin. They had combed her tangled hair, restoring its natural shine. And they had dressed her in a simple but clean gown, replacing her tattered rags with a garment of comfort and dignity. For the first time in months, she saw herself not as a beggar, not as a worthless outcast, but as a girl again, a young person with dreams and aspirations. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Mama, Papa, if only you could see me now." Dinner was served in the great hall, a vast and opulent space that could easily accommodate 100 guests. The long table glistened with fine china, silverware, and crystal glasses. Plates of steaming soup, grilled fish, fragrant rice, savory beans, and roasted goat meat were arranged artfully, tempting the palate with their rich aromas. Mary sat timidly beside Daniel, feeling self-conscious and out of place in such lavish surroundings. The staff stood around, their presence adding to her discomfort. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others frowned openly, their expressions conveying their resentment and disdain. As Mary tentatively lifted her spoon, Angela leaned close to another maid and whispered loudly, her voice carrying through the hall. "This house is for kings and queens," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Not street rats." The words stung Mary like a slap, shattering the fragile sense of security she had begun to build. Her hand froze in midair, and she felt small and insignificant again, as if the street had somehow followed her into the mansion, tainting her with its shame. Daniel noticed her distress and turned sharply, his eyes scanning the room, searching for the source of her discomfort. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice echoing like thunder, silencing the whispers and judgmental glances. "This girl is now part of my family. If I hear a single insult again, that person will leave this house forever." The hall went silent, the staff lowering their gaze in a mixture of fear and resentment. But silence does not erase hate. It only buries it deeper, allowing it to fester and grow in the darkness. Later that night, Mary sat on her new bed, staring at the soft pillows and clean sheets with a mixture of awe and unease. She should have felt peace, a sense of relief at having finally found a safe haven. But something disturbed her spirit, a nagging feeling that she didn't belong, that she was an intruder in this world of wealth and privilege. She remembered Angela's cold eyes, the icy stare that had seemed to penetrate her very soul. She remembered the whispers of the staff, their hushed voices conveying their judgment and disapproval. And somewhere in the shadows, she sensed Patrick's gaze, watching her like a hawk, scrutinizing her every move, waiting for her to falter. She pulled Daniel's jacket closer around her shoulders, seeking comfort in its warmth and familiarity. "They can hate me," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the silence. "They can laugh at me, they can try to break me, but I will not go back to the street. Never again." In the corridor outside her room, Patrick whispered to Angela, his voice dripping with malice. "You don't like her, do you?" "Of course not," Angela hissed, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Neither do I," Patrick replied. "Let's make sure she doesn't stay long." Angela's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with a wicked delight. "Then let's show her that this mansion is not a place for orphans," she said. And just like that, while Mary thought she had finally found safety and security, a storm was already gathering in the House of Gold, a tempest of envy, betrayal, and malice that threatened to shatter her newfound hope. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of Daniel's mansion, flooding the marble floor with golden light. Birds sang merrily from the garden, their cheerful melodies filling the air. But inside, Mary woke with a heavy heart, the remnants of her troubled dreams clinging to her like a shroud. Though she now slept on a soft bed and ate warm food, the whispers of the staff still pierced her like knives, reminding her that she was an outsider, an unwelcome guest in their world. She tiptoed into the dining hall, where breakfast was laid out in an extravagant display. Bread, eggs, steaming cups of pap, an assortment of fresh fruits, and fragrant tea were arranged on the table, offering a tempting array of options. Daniel wasn't home yet, having left early for a business meeting in another city. The staff stood around, some pretending to be busy, but their eyes constantly strayed towards her, their expressions conveying a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Angela, the head housekeeper, walked in wearing her signature fitted gown and her usual cold smile. She glanced at Mary from head to toe, scrutinizing her with a critical eye. A sneer twisted her lips as she spoke. "So, this is what it has come to," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A street child sitting in the master's dining room, eating from his table." Mary lowered her eyes, shame washing over her. "Sir Daniel told me to eat here," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Angela's voice cut through the air like a blade. "And do you think his kindness will last forever?" she asked, her tone laced with mockery. "He pities you today, but tomorrow, when he grows tired of you, he will throw you out just as easily as he took you in. You are nothing but a beggar, a fleeting amusement in his life. Don't ever forget that." The maids chuckled, their whispers echoing through the hall, amplifying Mary's sense of humiliation. Mary's throat tightened, and she fought back the urge to cry. She remembered Daniel's words, the words that had given her hope in the face of adversity. "You are not useless," he had said. "You are a warrior." She held on to those words like armor, protecting herself from the barbs of Angela's cruelty. Just then, Patrick entered the dining hall, a smug smile playing on his lips. He had overheard Angela's taunts and saw an opportunity to further undermine Mary's position. He clapped his hands together, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Angela, you are absolutely right," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. "This girl is enjoying a luxury she doesn't deserve. She is living a life that should be reserved for those who have earned it, not for someone who has simply stumbled upon it. But perhaps," he added, a gleam in his eye, "we should help her find her true place, remind her of where she really belongs." Angela's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "What do you have in mind?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Patrick lowered his voice, but made sure that Mary could still hear every word he said. "Sir Daniel trusts me implicitly," he said. If we can provide him with irrefutable proof that she is still a thief at heart, he will turn against her in an instant. He will see that he made a mistake in bringing her here. Then, he concluded, his smile as sharp as a knife, the streets will call her back, and she will be forced to return to the life she so desperately tried to escape. Mary's chest tightened with fear. The trap was being set, and she was the unsuspecting prey. But she remained silent, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. That evening, when Daniel returned from his business trip, Patrick was already waiting for him, ready to spin his web of deceit. "Sir," Patrick said, his face etched with false concern, "I don't want to worry you, but something troubling has happened today. The little girl you brought home, she stole from the kitchen." Daniel's brows furrowed in disbelief. "What are you saying, Patrick?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Patrick sighed heavily, as if it pained him to speak the words. "I caught her sneaking food into her room," he said. "Angela witnessed it as well. Sir, we all know her kind. A thief on the street will always remain a thief, no matter how many fine clothes she wears or how many kind gestures she receives. It's in their nature." Angela stepped forward, her face carefully arranged into an expression of fake pity. "It's true, sir," she confirmed. "I saw her hiding bread under her gown, her movements furtive and suspicious." Daniel turned sharply to Mary, who stood frozen in the corner, her face pale with fear. His deep eyes searched hers, seeking the truth. "Is this true, child?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of disappointment. Mary's lips trembled. She shook her head quickly, her eyes pleading for understanding. "No, sir," she stammered. "I didn't steal anything. I was eating here like you told me to. I never hid any food in my room. They are lying." Patrick smirked inwardly, pleased with how his plan was unfolding. Angela folded her arms, her expression unwavering. "The evidence speaks for itself, sir," she said. The room was heavy with silence, the air thick with tension and suspicion. Daniel stepped closer to Mary, his eyes never blinking, his gaze unwavering. "Look at me, child," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Did you steal?" Tears welled up in her eyes and streamed down her face as she whispered, "No, sir. I may be poor, but I am not a liar." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing, his silence amplifying the anxiety that gripped Mary's heart. Then, he turned slowly to Patrick and Angela, his expression unreadable. "Did either of you actually see her steal, or are you simply repeating gossip, jumping to conclusions based on prejudice and assumption?" Angela stuttered, her composure faltering slightly under Daniel's intense gaze. I saw her moving suspiciously," she stammered. "That is not proof," Daniel cut in, his voice sharp and authoritative. He turned to Patrick, his eyes filled with disappointment. "And you, my assistant, my trusted confidant. For years you have worked alongside me, handling my affairs, representing my interests. You should know better than to bring me half-truths, to base accusations on flimsy evidence. I expect more from you." He paused, his voice softening slightly as he addressed them both. "If you ever accuse someone in this house again, I expect you to bring me concrete evidence, irrefutable proof that leaves no room for doubt. Otherwise, I will consider it a personal affront, a betrayal of the trust one have placed in you." Patrick's jaw clenched, but he bowed his head respectfully, masking his anger and resentment. "Yes, sir," he mumbled. Daniel knelt down and gently wiped Mary's tears with his handkerchief, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Listen to me, child," he said, his voice filled with warmth and reassurance. "I do not care what they say. I do not care about their whispers and their prejudices. From now on, you will walk with your head held high, proud of who you are and what you have overcome. You owe no one here an explanation but me, and I believe you. I trust you." The staff looked away in shame, their faces reflecting a mixture of guilt and resentment. But deep down, their hatred only grew stronger, their determination to get rid of Mary intensifying with each passing moment. Angela's eyes burned with quiet rage, her face contorted with silent fury. Patrick's fists clenched by his side, his nails digging into his palms. He trusts her too much, he thought bitterly. If I don't act fast, she will take everything from me, everything I have worked so hard to achieve. That night, as Mary lay in her bed, the mansion felt colder than the street, more dangerous than the alleys she had once roamed. At least outside, she knew who her enemies were. They wore their hatred on their sleeves, their intentions clear. Here, they wore uniforms, smiled fake smiles, and stabbed with whispers, their treachery concealed beneath a veneer of respectability. She hugged herself tightly, shivering despite the warmth of the room. I will not let them win, she whispered into the silence, her voice filled with determination. They want me to run. They want me to give up and go back to the life I left behind. But I will stay. I will endure. One day, they will see me for who I truly am. One day, they will bow to me. One day, I will show them that I am not just a beggar girl. I am more than that. Outside her door, Patrick and Angela stood in the shadows, their voices barely audible above the gentle hum of the mansion. She is winning Daniel's heart, Angela hissed, her eyes filled with venom. Patrick's eyes narrowed, his expression as cold and calculating as a serpent. Then we must break her spirit before it's too late, he said. Next time we will not accuse her with mere words. We will trap her with evidence, with undeniable proof that will leave Daniel no choice but to believe us. And so the mansion glittered that night with lights, its opulence masking the darkness that lurked within its walls. Behind its golden facade, envy and betrayal had begun to weave their net, ensnaring Mary in a web of deceit and malice. Mary, unaware of the storm being prepared against her, closed her eyes, clutching Daniel's jacket around her shoulders. She thought she had escaped rejection forever, that she had finally found a place where she could belong. But the real battle was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than she could ever have imagined. The mansion was buzzing with activity, the air thick with a sense of anticipation. Daniel was away on a 3-day business trip to Lagos, leaving Patrick in charge of everything. To the staff, that meant strict rules and harsh punishments, a period of heightened vigilance and increased scrutiny. To Patrick, it meant an open stage to enact his plan, a golden opportunity to destroy Mary once and for all. Angela walked into Patrick's office, her heels clicking sharply on the polished marble floor. She folded her arms, her face etched with impatience. The girl is still here, she said, her voice dripping with resentment. She is eating from the master's table like a queen, enjoying the life that should be ours. If we don't act now, she will soon win his whole heart, and we will be left with nothing. Patrick leaned back in his chair, his eyes as cold and emotionless as ice. Don't worry, he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. By the time Daniel returns, Mary will be nothing but a thief in his eyes, a reminder of his own misguided generosity. I will make sure he throws her out himself, banishing her from this house forever. Angela smirked, a cruel glint in her eyes. How? She asked, eager to know the details of his plan. Patrick leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Tonight, he said, we plant money in her room, a sum large enough to convince Daniel that she is a hardened criminal. Tomorrow, I will discover it during a routine inspection, ensuring that everyone witnesses her downfall. Even Daniel cannot deny such blatant proof. Angela's eyes glittered with excitement. Good, she said, her lips curling into a malicious smile. Let the little rat taste the dirt again. Let her experience the humiliation and despair she so richly deserves. That evening, while Mary sat in the library, struggling to decipher the words in the small storybook Daniel had given her, Angela snuck into her room, her movements quick and stealthy. In her hand was a brown envelope stuffed with crisp banknotes, money that belonged to Daniel's company, funds that had been entrusted to Patrick's care. She slid the envelope carefully under Mary's pillow, her lips curling with satisfaction. The trap was set, and all that remained was to spring it. When Mary returned to her room, tired but content after spending the evening lost in the world of stories, She knelt beside her bed and offered a silent prayer, thanking God for the kindness she had received and asking for strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Then, she lay down on her bed, hugging Daniel's jacket close to her body, seeking comfort in its familiar scent. She was unaware that a trap was waiting beneath her head, a web of deceit that threatened to destroy her newfound happiness. The next morning, Patrick gathered all the staff in the main hall, his voice booming with false authority. "Sir Daniel left me in charge during his absence," he declared, "and it is my responsibility to ensure that this house remains free of thieves and criminals. I will not tolerate any dishonesty or betrayal under my watch." He paused, his eyes scanning the faces of the assembled staff, creating an atmosphere of unease and suspicion. "Last night," he continued, "a significant amount of money went missing from the office. After careful consideration, I have come to the conclusion that we must conduct a thorough search of every room in the mansion." Angela gasped loudly, pretending to be shocked and outraged. "Oh no!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with fake indignation. "Could it be one of the maids? Has someone betrayed our trust?" Patrick's eyes glinted with malice. "We shall soon find out," he said, his voice as cold as ice. "The truth will be revealed." One by one, the rooms were searched, the maids trembling with fear, the security guards standing tense and alert, and the whispers of suspicion and gossip filling the air. Finally, the search party reached Mary's room. Patrick himself walked in, followed by Angela and two burly security guards. Mary stood by the door, her face pale with confusion and nervousness. She couldn't understand why her room was being searched, what she had done to warrant such scrutiny. Patrick went straight to the bed, his movements deliberate and dramatic. With a triumphant sweep of his hand, he lifted the pillow. Danielle's kindness was repaid with bitter accusations. "Guards, lock her in the small storeroom until the master returns. He will decide her punishment." The guards hesitated, their faces etched with conflict. Some felt pity for the weeping girl, her sobs echoing through the grand hall, but Patrick's authority was absolute. They reluctantly dragged Mary toward the storeroom, the cold stone floor amplifying the sound of her desperate cries. "Please, please believe me. I didn't steal." For the first time since entering the mansion, the sting of betrayal felt sharper than hunger. Daniel had offered her a glimmer of hope, a lifeline in her desperate existence, but now his own people had shackled her with lies, their accusations like invisible chains binding her. "Why me, God?" she sobbed, collapsing onto the dusty floor. "Why does the world hate me so much? I never stole. I never harmed anyone. Why do they want to destroy me?" But amidst her despair, she clung to Daniel's words, spoken with such conviction just days before. "You are not useless. You are a warrior." She clenched her fists, wiping away the tears that threatened to drown her resolve. "No," she whispered fiercely to herself, her voice trembling but firm. "I will not break. They think they have won, but I will prove them wrong." Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Outside the mansion walls, a young driver named Samuel, a kind soul who had always treated Mary with respect, approached the storeroom door with a tray of food hidden beneath a napkin. He whispered through the crack, his voice laced with concern. "Don't cry, Mary. I believe you. I saw Angela leaving your room last night. Something is not right." Mary's eyes widened, her heart leaping with a flicker of hope. "You saw her?" Samuel nodded cautiously. "Yes. I saw her slipping out of your room, clutching something in her hand. I didn't say anything because I feared losing my job, but I know you didn't steal. Be strong. When Sir Daniel returns, I will tell him the truth." Hope ignited within Mary's heart. The trap was strong, carefully constructed to ensnare her, but perhaps God had sent her a witness, a lifeline in her darkest hour. Meanwhile, on the grand balcony overlooking the city, Patrick stood with Angela, swirling the ruby liquid in his wine glass with a self-satisfied smirk. He watched the sun sink behind the cityscape, casting long shadows across the opulent mansion. "By the time Daniel returns," he confided in a low voice, his eyes glinting with malice, She will be nothing but dust under his feet, and I will be one step closer to his throne than ever before. But Patrick, blinded by his ambition, didn't know that Daniel's return would come sooner than expected, bringing with it a twist of fate that would shake the mansion to its very foundations, a tempest that would expose the secrets hidden beneath its gilded surface. The mansion was unusually tense that evening, the air thick with unspoken accusations. The staff whispered in hushed tones in the shadowed corners, their eyes darting nervously toward the locked storeroom where Mary sat alone on the cold, unforgiving floor. Patrick, emboldened by his perceived victory, walked through the halls with a swagger, as though he already owned the place, his ambition casting a long, ominous shadow before him. Angela followed him like a devoted shadow, her smile sharp and cruel as she reveled in Mary's misfortune. "By tomorrow," Patrick whispered, his voice dripping with disdain, "Sir Daniel will send her back to the gutter where she belongs." Angela chuckled, her eyes narrowed with malicious glee. "And when he does, everyone will know you were right all along. They will sing your praises for protecting his reputation." But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Just before midnight, the sweeping arc of headlights cut across the darkness of the driveway. The rumble of powerful engines echoed through the night as Daniel's convoy returned hours earlier than expected. The heavy mansion doors swung open, and Daniel strode in, tall and confident, his presence instantly filling the grand hall with an undeniable aura of power. Patrick, feigning surprise, rushed forward, his face a mask of false concern. "Sir, we didn't expect you back tonight." Daniel's eyes scanned the tense faces gathered in the hall, his gaze sharp and discerning. "Why is the staff gathered at this hour? What is the meaning of this?" Angela, seizing the opportunity, stepped forward quickly, her voice dripping with insincere regret. "Sir, we regret to inform you that there has been a theft. A most unfortunate incident." Daniel's face hardened, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "A theft in my house? Unacceptable." Patrick bowed slightly, his voice laced with false sorrow. "Yes, sir. And the thief is the girl you brought in, the one you took in out of the goodness of your heart. We found money hidden under her pillow. It was clear evidence of her deceit. To protect your good name, I had her locked in the storeroom until your return." Gasps rippled through the assembled staff, many of whom had heard the carefully crafted story earlier that day. Daniel's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, but simply raised his hand, his silence more intimidating than any outburst. "Bring her here." Moments later, the guards reluctantly opened the storeroom door. Mary stumbled out, weak from hunger and exhaustion, her face pale and streaked with tears, her simple gown dusty and rumpled from the cold floor. She clutched Daniel's jacket tightly around her shoulders as though it were her last shield, her only source of comfort in the storm that surrounded her. When she saw him, her knees buckled, and she nearly collapsed. "Sir, please believe me. I didn't steal." Her voice broke with desperation, a raw plea for justice. Patrick quickly cut in, shaking his head with feigned disappointment. "Don't be fooled by her tears, sir. The money was right there in her room, hidden beneath her pillow. Angela saw it, I saw it. She betrayed your kindness, sir." Angela folded her arms, nodding confidently, her eyes fixed on Daniel. "Yes, sir. We only wanted to protect the mansion, to protect your reputation. It was our duty." Daniel's eyes swept from Mary to Patrick, then to Angela, his gaze piercing and unwavering. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried the weight of command, silencing the room with its power. Did anyone else witness this? The hall fell silent, every eye fixed on Daniel. No one spoke, fear and uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. But then, from the back of the crowd, a timid voice rose, cutting through the oppressive silence. "I saw something." Every head turned toward the speaker. It was Samuel, the young driver, his face pale but resolute. He stepped forward nervously, his hands shaking slightly, but his eyes held a spark of courage. I saw Madame Angela entering Mary's room last night with an envelope. I thought maybe she was putting something there for her, some kind of gift. But this morning suddenly they said money was found. A heavy silence fell, thicker and more oppressive than before. Angela's face turned ashen, her composure crumbling. Patrick's jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with fury. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on Angela, sharp as lightning. "Angela, is this true?" Angela stuttered, her voice trembling with panic. "No, no, sir. The boy must be mistaken. He probably saw me passing by. He's confused." But Daniel's gaze remained fixed on her, unrelenting, piercing through her carefully constructed facade. "Do not lie to me." His voice cracked like thunder, sending shivers down the spines of those who stood nearby. Mary wept quietly, her tears flowing freely, but there was a newfound strength in her tears now. A quiet dignity born of knowing the truth was finally emerging. "Sir, I swear on my parents' graves, I did not steal. I may be poor, but I still have my dignity. I was framed." Daniel turned slowly to Patrick, his eyes burning with accusation. "And you? You claimed you saw it, too. You were so quick to condemn her." Patrick straightened his shoulders, forcing a confident smile, though his eyes betrayed his fear. "Sir, I only did my duty. The evidence was there, undeniable. I only wanted to protect your name, your reputation." Daniel's silence was dangerous, a heavy weight that pressed down on the hall. He studied Patrick for a long moment, his eyes searching for any sign of remorse, any flicker of truth. Then he spoke, his voice cold and decisive. "You speak of protecting my name, yet you rush to accuse a child with no proof. If Samuel had stayed silent, I might have believed your lies. But now I see the truth. You and Angela plotted this together." Gasps filled the hall, a wave of shock and disbelief washing over the staff. They looked at one another, some nodding in agreement, others covering their mouths in stunned silence. Angela fell to her knees, trembling uncontrollably, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. "Sir, forgive me. I only followed Patrick's orders. I was manipulated." Patrick's face darkened with fury. "You liar. You were the one who suggested it. You were the mastermind behind this whole scheme." Their carefully constructed alliance crumbled in seconds, each desperately trying to throw the blame onto the other, their accusations echoing through the hall. The staff murmured louder, disgust and disbelief written on their faces as they witnessed the betrayal unfolding before them. Daniel raised his hand, silencing the hall with a single gesture, his authority absolute. His voice was calm, but heavy with power, cutting through the chaos like a sword. "Enough. From this moment forward, Angela, you are dismissed from my household. Your services are no longer required. Patrick, you have betrayed my trust, a trust one gave you freely. You are no longer my assistant." Patrick's face twisted with rage, his carefully cultivated composure shattering. "Sir, you cannot throw away 5 years of loyalty for a street rat. I have served you faithfully." Daniel's eyes burned with righteous anger. "She is more loyal than you ever were. You saw her as worthless, as nothing more than a nuisance. But I see her for who she truly is, a child of destiny. Leave my house, both of you, before I have the guards drag you out." Patrick stood frozen, his pride shattering, his ambition turning to ash in his mouth. Slowly, he turned and walked out, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with a cold fire of revenge. Angela followed behind, sobbing bitterly, her dreams of power and wealth dissolving into dust. Silence fell again, heavier and more profound than before. Daniel turned to Mary, who was still on her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. He lifted her gently, his voice soft and filled with compassion. "Do you see now, child? Even in the face of betrayal, the truth will always rise to the surface, like oil on water. Never forget this. You may be poor, but your honesty is worth more than all the gold in this house." Mary's tears flowed freely, but they were tears of relief, tears of gratitude, tears of hope. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt safe again, protected not just by Daniel's power, but by his unwavering belief in her innocence. The mansion that had been her prison, a place of fear and uncertainty, was slowly transforming into a refuge, a place where she could finally begin to heal. Daniel looked at the rest of the staff, his gaze sweeping over their faces, his message clear. Let today be a warning to all of you. This child is under my protection. If anyone here dares to mock her, to belittle her, or to treat her with anything less than respect, you will follow Patrick and Angela out of these gates. The staff bowed their heads, murmuring their agreement, fear and respect mingling in their eyes. Mary clutched Daniel's hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. Her loyalty to him solidified. But deep inside, she also felt something new, a spark of strength, a flicker of defiance. She had faced lies, rejection, and betrayal, all the weapons of her enemies. Yet, she was still standing, battered but not broken, her spirit unbroken. But outside the mansion gates, Patrick stood in the shadows, his teeth clenched, his eyes burning with a cold, unwavering hatred. This is not over, he hissed into the darkness. She may have won today, but I will return. And when I do, I will make her regret ever stepping foot into this house. And so, while Mary tasted victory for the first time, a darker storm was already forming on the horizon, fueled by envy and revenge. A storm that threatened to engulf her newfound peace and plunge her back into the darkness from which she had so recently escaped. The next morning, the mansion felt lighter. The oppressive atmosphere of the previous day lifted like a heavy fog. For the first time since Mary had entered its grand halls, she walked through the marble corridors without feeling the weight of whispers and suspicion pressing down on her back. The staff bowed slightly as she passed, not out of love or affection, but out of fear of Daniel's words the night before. Mary noticed it all, the subtle shifts in their behavior, the lingering looks of curiosity and uncertainty. But she didn't gloat. She didn't revel in her triumph. She carried her tray of pap and bread carefully to the table, her steps gentle, her eyes lowered in humility. Inside, though, her heart was alive with something new, something she had never experienced before: dignity. Daniel entered the dining hall, wearing a dark suit, his presence commanding as always. He stopped when he saw Mary sitting alone, eating timidly. "Child, why do you sit alone? Come, sit closer to me." She moved toward him hesitantly, her voice soft with deference. "Sir, I don't want to disturb you." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes filled with warmth. "You don't disturb me, Mary. You remind me why I must keep fighting in this world, why I must strive for justice and compassion. Eat, child. After breakfast, I will send for a teacher. You will begin to learn how to read and write properly." Mary's eyes widened, her face lighting up with surprise and joy. "A teacher? For me?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You are not just a survivor anymore, Mary. You are more than what you have been through. You will grow, you will learn, and one day you will stand tall and strong without needing my name to protect you." Tears stung Mary's eyes, blurring her vision. But they were tears of joy, tears of gratitude, tears of hope for a future she had never dared to imagine. For the first time since her parents' death, she felt seen, not as a burden or an inconvenience, but as a seed ready to grow, a plant with the potential to blossom. That afternoon, Madame Rose, a patient and kind tutor with a gentle smile and a warm heart, arrived at the mansion. She gave Mary her first real lesson in reading and writing, patiently guiding her through the unfamiliar symbols. Mary stumbled over the letters, her brow furrowed in concentration. But every time she made a mistake, Rose smiled gently and said, "Try again, Mary. You can do it." And Mary tried again and again, driven by a fierce determination not to waste the chance Daniel had given her, fueled by a desire to learn and grow. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion slowly changed for her. She helped the maids clean the gardens, not because she had to, but because she wanted to stay humble, to remember where she had come from. She thanked the guards each morning, offering them a warm smile and a kind word. She offered to carry water for the cooks, assisting them with their tasks, her willingness to help earning their respect. Slowly, a few staff members began to respect her, not because of Daniel's protection, but because of her own kindness, her own hard work, her own unwavering spirit. But outside the golden gates, darkness brewed, festering in the heart of a man consumed by envy and revenge. Patrick sat in a small, dimly lit bar on the edge of town, his once polished suit now wrinkled and stained, his face etched with bitterness and resentment. He had lost everything, his position, his wealth, his respect. And in his twisted mind, only one person was to blame: Mary. "She thinks she won?" Patrick muttered, slamming his glass on the table, the force of the blow rattling the cheap glassware. "She thinks she can take my place, sit where I sat. I built my life beside Daniel for 5 years, dedicating myself to his success. And now, a street girl sits where I should be, basking in the glow of his favor." Across from him sat a man with sharp eyes and a scar running across his cheek, a permanent reminder of a life lived on the edge. His name was Felix, a businessman with a reputation for shady deals and a ruthless ambition. He leaned forward, smirking, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. "If you want her gone, I can help you, but it will cost you. Justice is never free." Patrick's eyes lit with bitterness, his face contorted with rage. "Money is not the problem, Felix. I want her destroyed, utterly and completely. I want Daniel to regret ever touching her, ever bringing her into his life." Felix grinned, his scarred face stretching into a grotesque mask. "Then we'll plan a scandal so big, so devastating, that even Daniel Johnson cannot save her. We'll tear down his empire and leave her buried beneath the rubble." Meanwhile, Mary's days blossomed inside the mansion, each one filled with new discoveries and newfound hope. She now read short sentences with increasing ease, her fingers tracing the words with a sense of wonder. She learned how to write her name in elegant cursive, a testament to her progress. She even began helping Madame Rose with small notes, delivering messages to the staff with a sense of purpose. Daniel often watched her quietly from the doorway, a proud smile playing on his lips, witnessing her transformation with a sense of quiet satisfaction. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the clouds with hues of red and gold, Daniel sat with Mary in the garden, the scent of roses filling the air. She wore a clean dress, her hair neatly braided by one of the kind maids, a stark contrast to the disheveled and starving child he had first encountered. "Mary," Daniel said softly, his voice filled with warmth and affection, "you must promise me something. No matter what people say, no matter how much hatred they throw your way, never let their bitterness turn you into someone you're not. Use your pain as a source of strength, a catalyst for growth. That is how I built my empire, how I overcame the obstacles in my path." Mary nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on his, absorbing his words with unwavering attention. "I promise, sir. I will try my best. But will the world ever stop hating me?" Daniel's eyes grew distant, his gaze drifting to the horizon as he considered her question. "The world will always have people who hate what they don't understand, people who are quick to judge and slow to forgive. But you must rise above them, Mary. You must not let their negativity define you. That is the only way to win, to triumph over adversity." His words sank deep into her heart, a beacon of hope in the darkness that still lingered at the edges of her life. But just as hope was taking root in Mary's life, just as she was beginning to believe in a brighter future, shadows gathered again, drawn by envy and revenge, threatening to extinguish the fragile flame of her newfound happiness. That night, Patrick moved in secret with Felix, their meeting shrouded in secrecy and fueled by malice. They forged documents, bribed a disgruntled guard who craved more money, and prepared a lie so sharp and convincing that it could cut through Daniel's trust like a knife, severing the bond that had formed between them. Felix's voice was smooth and menacing as he sealed the envelope containing their carefully constructed web of deceit. "By the time this reaches Daniel, your little orphan will look like a traitor, not a daughter. He will drive her out himself, and will be there to watch her fall." Patrick's lips curled into a cold smile, his eyes gleaming with sadistic anticipation. Good. Let her taste the streets again, feel the cold and the hunger that she escaped. But this time, not even Daniel will be able to save her. Back in her room, Mary knelt by her bed, her hands clasped in prayer, her voice barely a whisper. God, thank you for bringing me this far, for giving me a second chance at life. But please, I beg you, don't let them take this away from me. Don't let me lose the only family I have left, the only person who believes in me. The mansion was peaceful, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, but outside its walls, betrayal was already creeping closer. A silent predator stalking its prey, ready to strike when Mary least expected it, shattering her dreams and plunging her back into the nightmare she thought she had left behind. The city was alive with noise, a cacophony of sounds that never ceased, even in the dead of night. Cars honking, vendors shouting, radios buzzing with music, the constant hum of urban life. But inside Daniel's mansion, a fragile peace reigned, a temporary respite from the storm that was brewing outside. Mary sat in the library, carefully tracing letters in her notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. Each curve of her pen, each word she learned, felt like a small victory, a triumph over the adversity she had faced. For someone who had once been called useless, who had been dismissed as worthless, every word she learned carried power, the power to shape her own destiny. Madame Rose smiled warmly, her eyes filled with pride. You learn quickly, Mary. You have a natural aptitude for language. Soon you'll be able to write full stories, to express yourself in ways you never thought possible. Mary beamed, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. She thought of Daniel's words, spoken with such conviction. You are not just a survivor, Mary. You are a seed ready to grow, a plant with the potential to blossom. But seeds don't grow without storms, and the most beautiful flowers often bloom in the face of adversity. And outside the mansion gates, a storm was brewing, a tempest of lies and deceit that threatened to uproot everything Mary had worked so hard to achieve. Patrick sat in Felix's office, his eyes burning with obsession, his mind consumed by thoughts of revenge. On the table lay a collection of forged documents and photographs, carefully crafted to deceive and destroy. They showed false transactions, fake signatures, and twisted lies, all designed to make Mary look like a thief plotting to steal Daniel's wealth, a viper in his bosom. Felix leaned back in his chair, puffing on a cigar, his eyes glinting with malicious satisfaction. When Daniel sees this, he'll believe the girl is using him, exploiting his kindness for her own gain. And when the media gets wind of it, his reputation will be dragged through the mud. He will have no choice but to throw her out, to disavow her in order to save himself. Patrick's lips curved into a cruel smile, his heart filled with a dark and twisted satisfaction. Good. Once she's gone, once she's back on the streets where she belongs, I'll return to Daniel's side. He will realize I was the only one loyal to him, the only one he could truly trust. The plan was set in motion that very night, a carefully orchestrated scheme designed to inflict maximum damage. The bribed guard, restless and greedy, sneaked into Daniel's office and placed the forged documents inside a locked drawer, knowing that Daniel would eventually find them. At the same time, Felix sent an anonymous envelope to the city's biggest newspaper, filled with blurry photos showing Mary walking beside Daniel in the mansion gardens. The note inside read, Billionaire Daniel Johnson being deceived by orphan girl. Secret plan to inherit fortune revealed. Is Daniel Johnson being scammed by a street urchin? By dawn, the city buzzed with rumors, the whispers growing louder with each passing hour. Newspapers carried bold headlines, screaming accusations and innuendo. Billionaire protects street girl. Secret plan to inherit fortune. Is Daniel Johnson being scammed by orphan girl? At the mansion gate, a throng of journalists gathered, shouting questions, flashing cameras, their relentless pursuit of a story threatening to overwhelm the security guards. Mary woke to chaos, the peaceful sanctuary of the mansion shattered by the intrusion of the outside world. As she stepped out of her room, staff members whispered harshly, their eyes filled with suspicion and disdain. I knew she was after his money all along. I knew she was too good to be true. She fooled him with her tears and her sob stories. She'll bring disgrace to this house. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as Daniel returned from his morning meeting, his face grim and unreadable. His driver handed him a newspaper, the headlines screaming back at him, accusing Mary of betrayal. For the first time since he had taken Mary in, a shadow of doubt crossed Daniel's face, his trust wavering under the weight of the accusations. He stormed into the mansion, his voice booming as he called for Patrick, his former assistant, unaware that Patrick was long gone, hiding in Felix's den, waiting for the damage to explode. Daniel entered his office and found the planted documents, his jaw tightening as he flipped through them. Fake bank slips, fake signatures, all meticulously crafted to point the finger at Mary, accusing her of plotting to steal his wealth. A cold knot formed in his chest, a chilling sense of betrayal. Could it be true? Had the girl he had trusted, the girl he had taken under his wing, betrayed him in the most despicable way? He summoned her to his office, his voice cold and distant. Mary entered timidly, her eyes wide with fear and confusion, sensing the shift in his demeanor, the change in the atmosphere. "Mary," Daniel said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "tell me the truth. Are you plotting to steal from me? Are you trying to take advantage of my kindness?" Mary froze, her face paling, her heart sinking like a stone. "What? No, sir. I would never do that. I would never betray you." Daniel threw the papers on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. "Then explain this. Your name, your handwriting, your signature. It's all right here in black and white." Mary's hands shook as she picked up the papers, her eyes widening in disbelief. It was her name, but she had never written those words, had never signed those documents. Someone had copied her handwriting from her lessons, using her newfound literacy to frame her. Her chest tightened with fear, her mind racing, trying to understand the enormity of the betrayal. "Sir, I didn't do this. I swear. Someone is trying to frame me again. Someone is trying to destroy me." But Daniel's face was unreadable, his eyes cold and distant, betraying nothing of his inner turmoil. The staff crowded the hall outside the office, whispering amongst themselves, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Angela's old allies smirked, their eyes filled with malicious glee, some whispering, "We told you so. She's a thief at heart. She'll always be a thief." Tears welled in Mary's eyes, blurring her vision, her voice trembling as she pleaded her innocence. "Please, sir, believe me. You said I was a warrior, that I had the strength to overcome any obstacle. You said I had dignity, that I was better than the circumstances of my birth. I would never repay your kindness with evil. I would never betray your trust." Daniel's silence was heavy, a suffocating weight that pressed down on the room. A war raged inside him, a conflict between his instinct to believe Mary, to trust the girl he had come to care for, and the undeniable evidence that seemed to condemn her. His heart told him Mary was innocent, that she was being framed, but the documents screamed otherwise, their accusations ringing in his ears. At that moment, Samuel, the young driver, stepped forward bravely, his face pale but resolute. "Sir, forgive me for speaking out of turn, but I believe she's innocent. Remember last time when they framed her with money? This is the same thing, another trap designed to ensnare her." The hall grew quiet, every eye fixed on Samuel, his courage breaking the oppressive silence. Daniel's eyes flicked to Mary, searching her face, looking for any sign of deception. Her tears were not of guilt, but of pain, of desperation. Deep inside, he felt the same fire he had seen in her that first day at the restaurant, the same indomitable spirit that had drawn him to her in the first place. Finally, he slammed the papers on the table, his voice ringing with authority. "Whoever planted these lies, whoever is behind this treachery, will regret it. Mary stays. Until I see true proof with my own eyes, until I am convinced beyond a doubt, I will not condemn her." The staff gasped, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some murmured in protest, questioning his decision, but Daniel's voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Enough. Anyone who speaks against her speaks against me. Anyone who dares to accuse her without proof will face my wrath." Mary broke down in tears, falling to her knees, her body trembling with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for trusting me." But far away in Felix's den, Patrick heard the news and slammed his fist on the table, his eyes burning with fury. He still defends her. He still refuses to see the truth. Then it's war. If he won't see the truth, I will bring him down with her. I will make him regret ever crossing me. And so, while Mary clung to Daniel's trust, her heart filled with gratitude, the battle lines grew deeper, the conflict escalating to a new level of intensity. The scandal in the newspapers was only the beginning, a mere prelude to the storm that was yet to come, a storm that threatened to destroy everything they held dear. The scandal spread through the city like wildfire, fueled by gossip and speculation, consuming everything in its path. Newspapers, radio, and the whispers in the marketplace all carried the same story, repeating the same accusations. Orphan girl deceives billionaire. Street urchin plots to steal fortune. Even those who had once admired Daniel, who had praised his generosity and compassion, began to whisper, "He is blinded by pity. He is being manipulated by a cunning street girl. She will ruin his empire. How can the richest man in the city be fooled by a street child?" Daniel held his head high, refusing to let the accusations break him, but inside, he burned with anger and frustration. He knew Patrick's hand was behind it, that his former assistant was orchestrating the campaign of lies. Yet the damage was real, the consequences undeniable. His business partners called him nonstop, demanding answers, questioning his judgment, threatening to pull out of contracts. One night, as Daniel sat alone in his study, his head in his hands, Mary knocked timidly and entered, her face pale and drawn. She carried her notebook, the pages filled with her carefully practiced handwriting, a testament to her determination. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, I can leave. If my presence is causing you this much pain, if my presence is threatening to destroy everything you've built, then maybe I should go. I don't want to be the reason you lose your name, your reputation." Daniel looked up sharply, his eyes fierce, his voice firm. "Mary, listen to me, and listen well. You did not cause this. You are not to blame. Evil men did this, men driven by envy and greed. And evil only wins when good people run and hide. You are not leaving. Do you hear me? You are staying here under my protection." Tears welled in her eyes, her voice choked with emotion. She nodded, clutching his words like a shield, finding solace in his unwavering belief in her innocence. But while Daniel comforted her, reaffirming his trust, Patrick prepared his next strike, his determination fueled by rage and resentment. In Felix's office, Patrick slammed his hand on the table, his eyes burning with a fanatical intensity. The newspapers were not enough. The whispers and the accusations are not enough. Daniel still protects her. We must hit him where it hurts, where he's most vulnerable. Felix's scarred face stretched into a cruel grin, his eyes glinting with anticipation. Then we break his empire. We bring down the house of cards he's built. I know about his next business deal, an international contract worth billions of dollars. A deal that will solidify his position as the most powerful man in the city. If we leak false evidence linking his new daughter to fraud and embezzlement, if we make it look like she's using his company to launder money, his partners will abandon him. He will lose everything and he will blame her. Patrick's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, his lips curling into a cold and twisted smile. Yes, when he falls, she will fall with him, and I will be there to watch them both crash and burn. The plan unfolded quickly, executed with ruthless efficiency. Documents were forged again, this time linking Mary's name to a secret offshore account, a hidden repository for ill-gotten gains. Emails were faked, trails were planted, all meticulously crafted to create the illusion of guilt. Within days, Daniel's international partners froze the deal, citing concerns about potential fraud and money laundering. The news hit the city like a thunderclap, shaking the foundations of Daniel's empire. Billionaire Daniel Johnson's empire shaken by scandal. International deal frozen amid accusations of fraud. The mansion turned into chaos, the atmosphere thick with fear and suspicion. Calls poured in from journalists and business associates, all demanding answers. Reporters camped outside the gates, their cameras flashing, their questions relentless. Even some of the most loyal staff members began to waver, their faith in Daniel shaken by the mounting evidence. "It's the girl," they whispered. "She brought bad luck. She's cursed." Mary felt their stares, their whispers, their accusations stabbing her like knives wherever she walked. Some of the maids no longer served her food with respect, their faces turned away, their eyes avoiding hers. Even Madame Rose grew worried, her gentle demeanor replaced with a nervous apprehension, whispering, "Child, this battle is bigger than you. Be careful. Stay safe." One evening, Daniel returned from a particularly grueling meeting, his face pale, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the world. Mary rushed to him, her eyes filled with concern. "Sir, please tell me what's happening. What's going on? Everyone blames me. They all think I'm responsible." Daniel sank into his chair, rubbing his forehead wearily. "They froze my contract, Mary. They suspended the deal. My enemies are using your name, using your presence in my life, to try and destroy me. But listen to me, and never forget this. Don't you ever think that you are the cause of this. Don't you ever believe that you are to blame. They are just using you as a weapon against me, a pawn in their game." Mary's chest tightened, her voice barely a whisper. "But what if they succeed, sir? What if they manage to destroy you? What if you lose everything because of me?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes fierce with determination, his voice unwavering. "If I lose everything but keep my integrity, if I lose my wealth but keep my soul, I will rise again. But if I abandon you, if I turn my back on someone who needs my help, then I lose my soul, and that is something I will never do." Mary's heart swelled with emotion, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude and admiration. But fear still gnawed at her, whispering doubts in the back of her mind. That night, something even darker happened, a betrayal so profound that it threatened to shatter her spirit completely. As she walked in the garden, seeking a moment of peace and quiet, a shadow moved behind her, lurking in the darkness. Suddenly, a rough hand grabbed her arm, pulling her into the darkness. She gasped, trying to scream, but a cloth was pressed over her mouth, suffocating her cries. Within seconds, everything went black, the world dissolving into an abyss of nothingness. When Mary opened her eyes, she was tied to a chair in a dim, filthy warehouse, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. Her heart pounded in fear, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what had happened. Patrick stood before her, his face twisted with rage, his eyes burning with a cold, malevolent fire. Well, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look who it is. The little beggar finally looks weak, finally shows her true colors. You thought you could take my place, didn't you? You thought you could sit where I sat, bask in Daniel's glory. Because of you, I lost everything. My position, my wealth, my respect." Mary's voice shook with fear, but her spirit remained unbroken, her eyes defiant. "You lost because of your own greed, because of your own ambition." The line went dead, severing the connection and igniting a white-hot rage in Daniel's chest. He slammed the phone down, the expensive wood of his desk cracking under the force. "Security!" he roared, the sound echoing through the opulent office. Within seconds, his team materialized, their faces grim and expectant. "Prepare the vehicles. Lock onto the coal shipment's location. Tonight this ends. Tonight we take back what's ours." Meanwhile, in the cavernous, frigid warehouse, Mary was a prisoner. She was bound to a rickety chair, the rough rope biting into her wrists. Her body ached from the abuse she had suffered. Her lips were parched and cracked, but a fierce ember of defiance still glowed within her. Daniel's words, spoken during their brief, desperate phone call, replayed in her mind like a sacred mantra. Asterisk, you are not useless. You are a warrior. Asterisk, they were a lifeline in the encroaching darkness. The heavy door creaked open, and Patrick, followed by the perpetually sweating Felix, entered. Mary lifted her chin, her eyes blazing with an unexpected strength. "Do you truly believe this charade will make you powerful?" she asked, her voice raspy but clear. You're pathetic. Weak men hiding behind layers of lies and empty threats. Patrick's face contorted with unadulterated rage. Silence, he spat. You ruined me. You poisoned Daniel's mind against me, made him see me as nothing. But after tonight, he'll lose everything because of you. He'll understand the price of choosing you over me. Mary's eyes flashed, reflecting the dim, flickering light of the warehouse. Daniel will never bend to your will. And even if you manage to take everything from him, he will still be 1,000 times the man you are. Because he has honor. He has integrity. What do you have? Lies, greed, and a bottomless pit of self-pity. Her words were like shards of ice, piercing his carefully constructed facade. Patrick recoiled, his face flushed crimson. He raised his hand as if to strike her, but just then, a thunderous boom ripped through the night. The warehouse doors splintered and burst inward as Daniel's security team stormed the building. High-powered flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the scene in a harsh, unforgiving light. The warehouse was instantly surrounded, every exit blocked. Hands in the air. Now, a guard shouted, his voice amplified by the cavernous space. Daniel stepped forward slowly, pushing through the ranks of his men, his face a mask of controlled fury. His voice, though calm, was edged with steel. Patrick, look at yourself. Remember the man you once were? A man I trusted, a man I considered a friend. Now, you're nothing but a coward, a pathetic excuse of a human being, hiding behind a child. Patrick's hand trembled, but his eyes remained fixed on Mary, filled with a twisted mixture of hatred and resentment. She took everything from me. You loved her more than you ever loved me. Daniel's eyes locked onto Patrick's, his gaze unwavering. She didn't take anything. You threw it all away yourself with your insatiable greed, your insatiable ambition. Release her, Patrick. End this now, and maybe, just maybe, you'll live long enough to rebuild some semblance of a life. Mary's heart pounded in her chest. This was her moment, her chance to take control. She whispered, her voice barely audible. Sir Daniel, don't plead for me. Don't beg him. Let him do what he wants. I am not afraid. Those words shattered the tense atmosphere. Patrick's eyes flickered with shock. The weak, trembling, insignificant beggar girl he had once despised now looked braver, stronger than him. In that moment of hesitation, Mary acted. She stomped down hard on his foot with all her might and ducked her head. The guards surged forward, disarming Patrick in a flurry of motion. He was dragged away, kicking and screaming, "No! She doesn't deserve this life. She doesn't deserve any of it." Felix, realizing the game was over, offered no resistance. He was already handcuffed, his empire of lies crumbling around him. Daniel rushed to Mary, gently untying her and pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt? Did he harm you?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I'm fine, sir, but I didn't want you to risk your life for me. I'm not worth it." Daniel's voice was soft, trembling with emotion. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "Mary, you are more than just a child I saved from the streets. You are family. You are precious to me. I would risk everything for you." The next morning, the city awoke to sensational breaking news splashed across every newspaper and television screen. Billionaire Daniel Johnson exposes massive corruption ring. Former assistant Patrick arrested. Orphan girl vindicated. Story of courage inspires millions. The truth, long suppressed, spread like wildfire, engulfing the city in a wave of shock and outrage. Daniel stood before a throng of reporters, the flashing cameras illuminating his face. Mary stood proudly by his side, no longer a shadow, but a beacon of hope. "This child," Daniel said, his voice ringing with conviction, "was once despised, rejected, branded as worthless. But she stood strong. She is living proof that no matter how poor, how abandoned, how seemingly insignificant you are, your inherent dignity cannot be stolen. Today, I declare her not just my ward, But my daughter. Mary Johnson. My daughter. The cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing the moment for eternity. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, a symphony of support and admiration. Mary, dressed in a clean, flowing white gown, looked out at the sea of faces. For the first time in her life, people weren't mocking her, weren't spitting on her, weren't looking through her as if she were invisible. They were clapping for her. They were celebrating her. She took the microphone with trembling hands, her voice soft but firm, carrying through the amplifiers. I was once a beggar, sleeping on the streets, scavenging for scraps. People spat at me, insulted me, left me to die. But one man, one incredible man, believed in me when no one else did. Today I say to every child suffering, to every child who feels lost and alone, don't give up. Don't ever give up. You are not useless. You are not invisible. You are warriors, every single one of you, and one day the world will see your worth. Tears streamed down cheeks in the crowd, a testament to the power of her words. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. Patrick and Felix faced trial, their carefully constructed empires of lies crumbling around them. Their names were forever stained with shame and infamy. Angela, too, was exposed for her complicity in their schemes and vanished into the shadows, a pariah forever haunted by her betrayal. But Mary's life was transformed, reborn. She went to school, devoured knowledge with a burning passion, and excelled in everything she attempted. Later, she dedicated her life to building an organization that fed and trained impoverished children, ensuring that no child would ever again have to steal food to survive. Her journey had begun with hunger, rejection, and betrayal, but it ended with power, dignity, and hope, because the girl who had once stolen food in desperation had stolen something far greater in the end: hearts, respect, and her destiny. She had become a legend, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the transformative power of hope and human kindness. And her legacy would live on, inspiring generations to come.